On the 30th of December 2022, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution asking the International Court of Justice to rule on the legal effects of Israel's occupation of Palestine. The decision, which marks the first such case against Israel in almost 20 years, sparked a furious response from the new Israeli government. But what exactly does it mean, and what could be the wider effects of any ruling? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. For almost 80 years, the Israel-Palestine conflict has been one of the most intense, controversial and emotional issues in international relations. However, while this seemed to be a moment when the conflict could be settled with the emergence of an independent Palestinian state, such hopes have seemingly now disappeared. Instead, over the course of the past decade and a half, Israel has strengthened its effective control over much of the territory, a situation that many now call a case of de facto annexation. But what exactly does this reality mean for the parties concerned, as well as for the wider international community? This is the challenge now facing the world's highest court. I've looked at the origins of the Israel-Palestine conflict in another video, and so I won't go into details again here. Suffice to say, it's an extremely complex issue, rooted in profoundly different interpretations of history, politics, and international law. However, for our purposes, the situation really emerged in 1947 when Britain decided to relinquish its colonial control over Palestine, and the United Nations decided that the territory should be partitioned between its Jewish and Palestinian Arab inhabitants. This plan was, however, rejected by the Palestinians and surrounding Arab states. Just hours after the State of Israel came into being on the 14th of May 1948, they launched an attack against the new country. However, Israeli forces managed to beat back the invasion, and in doing so took control of much of the territory that would have been granted to a Palestinian state. Meanwhile, having survived, Israel was admitted to the UN the following year, although it would remain almost entirely unrecognised by Arab and Muslim states. Over the next 20 years, there would be two further outbreaks of major fighting. The first was in 1956, when Israel invaded Egypt as part of a wider British-French plan to seize the Suez Canal. However, the most significant confrontation between Israel and its Arab neighbours came in 1967. Over the course of 6 days, Israeli forces seized several key territories. These included Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, a part of Palestine that had come under Egyptian control, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Palestinian territory annexed by Jordan in 1950, and the Golan Heights, a part of Syria. Following another war in October 1973, when Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel, Sinai was eventually handed back to Egypt in 1978 as part of a comprehensive US-brokered peace agreement between the two countries. However, despite UN calls for Israel to withdraw to the 1967 borders, it remained in control over the West Bank and Gaza, where it was now establishing settlements. Meanwhile, in 1981, it annexed the Golan Heights in a move explicitly condemned by the UN Security Council. By the middle of the 1980s, Palestinian opposition to Israeli control was growing, leading to increasingly violent unrest. But as the Cold War came to an end, hopes for peace grew. Following Norwegian-led talks, the two sides reached an historic peace agreement signed at the White House in 1993. This envisaged an Israeli withdrawal from the Palestinian territories and the transfer of power to the Palestinian Authority. This in turn would lead to permanent status negotiations and the eventual creation of a Palestinian state. However, in the years that followed, the plan began to falter, leading to further tensions, as well as Israel's decision to build new settlements in the West Bank against the wishes of the international community. Palestinian terrorist attacks began to grow. As a result, Israel began constructing a wall or separation barrier, stretching for hundreds of kilometres and rising to 9 metres in height, significant parts of it cut inside territory that had been widely expected to be part of a future Palestinian state. Following an international outcry, in December 2003, the UN General Assembly asked the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion on the legality of the wall. In October 2004, the court issued its opinion, deciding that it was an attempt to prejudge the future frontier between Israel and Palestine and could eventually amount to de facto annexation of territory. It ruled that the parts of the wall situated beyond the 1967 borders and within Palestinian occupied territory should be dismantled. However, this was immediately rejected by Israel, which continued building the barrier. In the 20 years since then, tensions have grown even further. While Israel took the major step of unilaterally dismantling its settlements in the Gaza Strip in 2005, elections held the following year were won by Hamas, an Iranian-backed group dedicated to Israel's destruction. Meanwhile, over in the West Bank, the number of settlements has steadily increased and expanded, as well as outbreaks of serious fighting. All this means that there's seemingly little or no realistic prospect of a comprehensive peace agreement leading to the creation of a Palestinian state. Indeed, the number of new settlements has reached a point where many now believe that the creation of a separate Palestinian state is no longer viable. In May 2021, the UN's 47-member Human Rights Council held a special session on the grave human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. As part of this, it established a 3-member International Commission of Inquiry to examine human rights abuses in Israel and the Palestinian territories. In October 2022, the Commission submitted a report to the UN General Assembly. This highlighted a range of important questions about the effects of Israel's continuing control of the Palestinian territories, including the use of Palestinian resources, control over planning and zoning, and the extension of Israeli law into the territories. On top of this, the committee also noted that the situation raised more general questions under international law, such as when a case of wartime occupation becomes unlawful and when occupation amounts to de facto annexation. It therefore recommended that the General Assembly urgently request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice to address the legal consequences arising from the occupation, settlement and annexation of Palestinian territory since 1967, including steps to change the demographic situation. Additionally, it recommended that the court should also clarify the wider implications of the situation for UN member states and for the United Nations itself. After strenuous efforts by Israel, the United States and others to prevent the request from going before the General Assembly, the matter was put to UN members on the 30th of December 2022. Then it passed by 87 votes in favour to 26 against, with 53 abstentions. As well as support from Muslim states, China and Russia also voted in favour, as did several major regional actors such as South Africa and Argentina. Similarly, 7 EU members also supported the resolution. In contrast, many key Western states voted against it, including the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and 9 EU members. Meanwhile, major abstentions included Brazil, Ethiopia, Japan and India, as well as 12 EU members, including France, Sweden, Denmark and Spain. The resolution, which is only the 4th such request for an advisory opinion made by the General Assembly in the past 20 years, was quickly hailed as a significant victory by senior Palestinian figures. It was also warmly welcomed by the members of the Commission of Inquiry. However, Israeli leaders have reacted furiously. Having assumed office just a day before the vote, the new Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, branded the decision despicable. Likewise, the country's new Foreign Minister condemned the decision as anti-Israeli, arguing that it wouldn't change anything on the ground. So, what happens now? The first step will see the request for an opinion sent to the court by the UN Secretary-General. At the same time, the UN Secretariat will start preparing a dossier of relevant documents to give to the judges. This will be followed by a call for written submissions from member states and relevant international organisations. Then there'll be oral proceedings. All being well, and going on previous examples, the court could well deliver its opinion at some point before the end of 2024. And this is where things will become interesting. The outcome is far from certain. First of all, the court will have to decide whether it has the jurisdiction to take up the question. This is likely to be heavily contested by Israel and its supporters, particularly the United States. Assuming it does take it up, it will then have to navigate an unusually complex issue. In many cases, for example on issues concerning territorial boundaries, the court tends to be given very precise questions. In contrast, this seems far more open-ended. How the judges choose to address the question and how they interpret the different legal issues will be fascinating to watch. But whatever happens, it'll be important to remember that advisory opinions aren't binding. Even if the court argues that Israel has violated international law, the Israeli government will be under no obligation to act on the decision. Likewise, whatever the court advises on the wider implications of the situation for member states, they too can choose what they want to do with the opinion. All this said, it won't be without significance. It will carry moral weight, and the Palestinians will certainly be watching with hope. In recent years, there's been a sense that the issue has been losing traction on the international stage. Meanwhile, more and more Arab states are engaging with Israel, either openly by recognising it or by pursuing close relations behind the scenes. The outcome of this decision may possibly modify that behaviour. Meanwhile, many observers will hope that the outcome will reinvigorate the search for a comprehensive final settlement, although, admittedly, this seems unlikely. More generally, the case could in fact have far wider significance. Depending on how the judges approach the question, it could well shape broader international understanding about the legal implications of long-term cases of occupation and de facto annexation, an issue that's seemingly becoming increasingly important in international relations. For all these reasons, this could well be one of the most interesting and significant cases to come before the ICJ in many years, and it will certainly be something for all of us to watch. Before I go, I'd like to say a special thank you to the always excellent World Politics Review for their extremely kind support for the channel. If you want more world-class analysis of international affairs, do check out their link above and in the description below. Meanwhile, if you found this video useful, here are some more that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, see you in the next video.